So Patrick here, I think as Dan kind of alluded to, we'll go through some of the framework here in the presentation, obviously jump in and chat, but we can kind of get into more specifics about company questions as well, either in the one-on-ones for the rest of the day, or if you didn't get on the calendar for one of those, always feel free to reach out. And as we kind of talked about here, so we're going to talk a little bit about pricing, and then we're going to go through basically a framework for thinking about pricing in your business. As you'll learn, pricing, obviously it's self-serving for us to say it's important, but fortunately we have some good data and some stuff like that for just to show how big of an impact it can have, and also give you some things that you guys can do just in your product and marketing cycles to be successful with it. But that being said, pricing overall, it's not hard. We talk to a lot of folks about pricing, every day, who they approach it like this big black box where they have to hire, a $400,000 McKinsey consultant to solve something, or they have to, hire a data scientist who can, do everything for them. The big thing though is it's not hard. It's just, it's not flowing right here. It's just a process. So once we arm you with some of these tools here today, there's plenty more that you guys could do besides what's in this prezo, but we'll definitely be able to kind of get you a process here. The one thing though is that there is no silver bullet. Kind of the flip side of having that conversation is that someone wants me to just give you a magic formula to solve all your pricing problems. Just do it once and never touch your pricing again. Unfortunately, there isn't a magic formula, but as we just kind of alluded to, it's pretty easy. We're going to go through just a quick overview of us so you understand a little bit of where we're coming from. We'll go to kind of a high level of pricing overall. It'll be very, very like MBA 101, and then go through the 3 P's of pricing: positioning, packaging, and the number on the page, or who you sell to, what you're selling, and how much you're actually selling it for. And if we have time, we do have, we look at a lot of this data for technology and SaaS companies all the time. So we do have some aggregate information and some fun facts that we can share with you guys that'll hopefully be helpful in what you guys are building. So price intelligently, very, very briefly, this is very marketing speak. We worked with a brand advisor that we have, but basically we help software and tech companies make more cash through customer and pricing intelligence. So we do have software, but a lot of what happens with our customers is they want help, or they don't have the bandwidth to work through this. So we help them get their pricing right, or to monitor kind of the value that customers see in all kinds of stuff. That being said, some logos here just to show who we work with. A lot of software companies, a lot of SaaS, a lot of tech. We've done a little bit of retail, but we've decided very early on that wasn't really the market that we wanted to be in. So that being said, let's chat a little bit about pricing. So hopefully you guys have some page or some rate card that looks a lot like this. But pricing in kind of a philosophical lens is something that's really, really important to your business, because it's kind of the center of your business if you think about it. Everything that you're doing on the sales, the marketing side, is pushing people to this page and then justifying the number on the page. And if you're kind of in an enterprise sale, everything you're doing is trying to get someone on the phone and then justifying what you're quoting them in an invoice or whatever you're trying to do. And then kind of on the other side of the business, the product team, the support team, finance and operations, that's just making sure that you're around long enough to continue to collect that cash that you're bringing in, but also that the product is worthwhile enough to justify the price as well. So it is the center of your business from a philosophical perspective, but a big thing you got to think about is the impact that it has on revenue. So McKinsey does this study every couple of years for about the past 2 decades, where they kind of look at the main levers in a business and the impact that it has on profit specifically. And the big kind of fun fact is that a 1% improvement in pricing, and that means improving who you're selling to, improving what you're selling, aligning those 2 things, or even just improving the actual number on the page, has about an 11% boost in profit. And we can compare that to things like cost or volume. And as you guys can see on the slide here, it's not as high of an improvement. A lot of times you want to improve all of these levers, but pricing is something that unfortunately, although it has a huge impact, we're really, really bad at it. This is a business development study that we did really early on. A lot of folks just kind of go to the defaults, which are competition and cost plus, and we'll talk about why those are really bad for a technology or specifically a SaaS business. My particular favorite is, 18% of folks are just guessing. We found that in earlier stage companies, and those are, very widely companies that have less than $100 million in annual revenue, they're spending about, on average, 6 hours on their pricing entirely, and that's it. And normally that's right when they're about to release the product. They're like, oh shit, I need a pricing page, to monetize. Or they're arguing in a boardroom back and forth and they're like, hey, just ship it. A good way to think about this and to counter that, just to kind of finish out this point about the importance of pricing, is if your product is improving, theoretically your price can be improving. Sometimes that doesn't mean that the price is actually going to change for a particular persona or for a particular plan, but oftentimes it does mean that you at least have to look at pricing. And just to kind of button hook this point as well, we're not saying that an early stage company should be, have a pricing person on board. It's not something that you maybe even do, every quarter. But we are saying, get the pricing page right first, at least using data, or at least just using an iteration of, based off of questions that you've asked your customers. And then look at this at least for a conversation every quarter, and then maybe make some serious changes, once every 6 months, along the lens of major product improvements that you guys continue to do. And then finally, just pricing 101 here. So we've all heard of cost plus pricing. It's pretty simple. Have your costs, put an arbitrary margin on top of it. We've all heard of competitor-based pricing. Find who your nearest competitors are and just peg your prices next to them. Both of these are really bad for the type of companies that you guys are. They're not bad in the sense that you don't look at them. They're bad because you can't make that the center of what your pricing is. And the main reason for that is because your costs, for the most part, don't really matter from a technology standpoint. Your biggest cost is probably overhead, people, and it doesn't yet matter. The marginal cost of adding a user is probably not much. That's the nature of the quote-unquote cloud. From a competitor standpoint, it's also really hard as well, because even if we all had CRMs, we all built CRMs, we could easily, because of the nature of code and building product, we could build different features for different types of customers, and we might all serve a different type of customer, and most of us probably wouldn't be going head to head necessarily. If we all wanted to be Salesforce, probably would be. But because of these two things that are really important to keep in mind, but not necessarily the center, you really need to price on value. And I know that makes perfect intuitive sense, and it's kind of like a oh duh, that's kind of obvious point. And a lot of people do talk about it. You'll see a lot of articles that are, for the lack of a better phrase, a little trite in business magazines, like, oh, price based off the customer, price based off value. But we're actually going to talk about how to do that and give you kind of a framework for that. So the main takeaway here is, align your positioning, your packaging, and pricing along your customer base. Any question there? I know that's kind of a whirlwind, lots of information, but all fairly straightforward. Is there any major questions?
Won't make your questions, but I do have one obvious question. I assume you'll be sharing the deck with the group after the seminar.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely will. Cool.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a recording. I don't know where to look in this room. I'm having trouble, do I look at the camera? That's kind of weird,
You're the special effects guy, we'll clean it all up.
Awesome.
It's like an explosion.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, very cool. And so the one other thing that I forgot to say too is, we're presenting for 45 minutes, we're talking for another 45. We're not going to solve your pricing problem after this deck, just to make that really clear. But like I said, hopefully we're putting you in the right direction. All right, oh, there you go. We got someone moving around the room to make it a little easier. All right, guys and gals, let's talk about positioning here. So positioning basically comes down to who you're selling to. Just talking to the guys at Conductor here before the call, they have a lot of options. They could go down and sell to small and medium-sized businesses. They could keep selling to enterprise customers. They could try and sell to all of them. Hopefully not all at once at the same time, but it comes down to kind of that positioning. And a little more obvious point, but we'll show kind of why this is important, but everything in your pricing starts with your customer personas. And the reason for that is, well, they're the ones who are actually purchasing it, whatever you're selling. But on top of that, when you're structuring your rate cards or your pricing pages, or however you're structuring things, you want to make sure that each of those tiers or each of those entry points that those individuals have align to a particular price point or a particular package. And the reason for that is because it really makes sure that, one, you're thinking about pricing correctly, but two, there's no kind of dissonance when a customer comes in, and it streamlines the entire sales process, especially for those folks who have standard pricing pages that are out there and don't have a sales team or have a very low touch sales team. Along with that, a big point here is that a lot of the persona stuff that we're talking about here, it's going to go in tandem with some of the other points, because you want to be able to identify who the best personas are. And oftentimes when we talk to a lot of SaaS and tech companies that are out there, you have a general sense of your personas, but you don't have it down to essentially a science of, I know that Startup Steve likes these things, I know their willingness to pay is this, I know Enterprise Eddie the same things, Marketing Mary, etc. And that's really, really important to figure out, because since pricing is kind of the center of what you guys are doing, you need to make sure that you're correctly optimizing for the right type of customer. So Startup Steve might be willing to pay more for something, but if they're not the entry-level customer, that's not necessarily where you want to align that pricing. Along with this is a really, really big point that is important, so you don't have awkward VC discussions when you're like doing really well, but you need to do better. And that's, you need to align along that customer's perception of value with what's known as your value metric. It's a little jargony. David Scott, who's like deep into SaaS metrics and things like that, he kind of coined this up. But a value metric is essentially what you're paying for. So really good way to learn this stuff is through example. So HubSpot, marketing automation, similar to Marketo or Eloqua or some of these other businesses out there, if you haven't heard of HubSpot specifically. But HubSpot's value metric, what they figured out is, in order for them to make more money and continually boosting their MRR, they essentially needed to make sure that the pricing grew as their customers grew. And what they did is they aligned it along contacts or number of contacts that are within HubSpot. And the way they can kind of argue for this is because if you have more contacts in your HubSpot, theoretically you're making more money off of those leads, and we can justify charging you more money for it. And there's some other stuff going on with this page that we'll talk about in a second, but it's really important to kind of figure out where those throttles are going to be and try to limit it not to just feature differentiation. So HubSpot, they could just as easily have this first half of the page with basic, professional, enterprise, but that only gets them $600 per month. That doesn't get them $7,000, $1,200 per month for a professional type customer who just has a lot of contacts that are out there. And to kind of summarize this point, your value metric, it needs to align to your customer's needs. It's got to grow with your customer, and it's got to be easy to understand. And a couple of examples here, and you can have multiple value metrics. One of our favorite companies out there is Wistia. They're a Boston-based company that does video hosting and analytics. And what they do is they give all of the features away essentially for free. Where you can be on the free plan and get access to every single feature, but as you use more and more of the product, whether it's the number of videos or the amount of bandwidth that you have, meaning the number of people viewing your videos, you essentially pay more. And what this allows Wistia to have is, if Disney comes in and says, hey, we want to host some of our videos on this marketing site with you guys, and then someone like Price Intelligently who doesn't have Disney level traffic, it makes sure that they're not paying the same amount of money. $99 per month that we would pay, Disney should be paying thousands per month for that type of traffic. So they're a really, really good one to look at, and it allows them to have $29, $23 per month users, all the way up to folks who have multiple terabytes of bandwidth and unlimited videos that are out there. Another example to look at with this kind of stuff is Kissmetrics, which I'm sure we've all heard of to at least a certain extent. So Kissmetrics had a really, really tough time early on with their pricing, at least from our perspective, mainly because they were trying to charge based on these events. So events could be, forms being filled out, number of hits to the API, all kinds of stuff. The problem with that is, one, it's not easy to understand. It's not a touchless sale, and even if they didn't want a touchless sale, it's kind of hard to explain on the phone. HubSpot, number of contacts, is pretty straightforward. The other thing is, I think Mixpanel's changed this, but which is a similar type of company, where they almost had it per hit to the point where you couldn't predict how much it was going to cost per month. And if you're selling to an enterprise customer, as you guys know with conductors, like, they need to predict, what's my budget, what's it going to be. There can be some variance, but not 50% one way or the other. So this is their current pricing page, or as of a month ago. And they've kind of structured it where you get up to a certain number of events. So it still feels like they're focusing in on that value metric, but it also makes sure that there's some of these categories that are there that someone can fit into. Another good example of this is someone like MailChimp. I think they're in here somewhere else. Or any email sending platform where you have a bunch of different categories of 0 to 100 emails, 101 to 200, et cetera, et cetera. Main takeaway here: really understand your value metric. You got to align that metric, and then most of your metrics will then fall into place. And what I mean by that is, if you think about it, and I can go back to Wistia here because I know those guys really well. If someone comes in at Wistia, and I can go back to that page here, and they're paying, let's say, $29 or $23 per month that they're paying annually here, and they don't feel, and they have aligned their value metric correctly in terms of bandwidth and usage, and all things controlled being equal in terms of support, and they don't piss off a customer, there's really no reason for them to churn out unless they just stop doing video, which means they're not a good customer anyways, or they run out of money. And so with a company like Wistia, their churn rate is exceptionally low, and they attribute it to the fact that their value is so closely aligned to their usage that they can almost predict, what's going to happen with their SaaS metrics every single month, or their revenue metrics, I should say. And their churn, whenever they do the conversations with people who are churning out, it's always like, oh, it didn't work out, our business is going, or hey, we fired our videographer and we're not really going to do video anymore, and things like that.
What's an example of a business that poorly identified their value metric? Or what's an example of what not to do?
Oh, good. Yeah, that's a good question. Per users, unless you're doing a CRM or something that's very user focused, a help desk or something like that, per user is probably the worst value metric out there. We've seen, and even including it and there's obviously exceptions here, but we've seen, there was a study done, I don't know the reference, but I can find it, where they looked at value metrics, people like the main value metric, and the people who are using per user and continue to use it per user were making essentially like 40% less than they could have been based off of different peers in their groups. Good example of this too is even including it, so we can talk about pricing pages till we're blue in the face, but when looking at using per user as a throttle, it's not even that great unless you figure out that there is true value there. So good example, we worked with an application performance monitoring company who was really into, you get 1 user, 3 users, unlimited. Their average number of seats that people used anyways was 1.2 or something like that. And when they did some value studies, they figured out, oh, no one cares about users. So it was a really weak way to like move people up the funnel and get them moving.
How about on the consumer side? What's one of your favorite value metrics and least favorite value metrics?
Yeah, consumer side is hard.
Such a different animal, but
yeah. I mean, obviously, like retail goods, here's the good for the price, but it's a little obvious.
I think the Apple sort of changed a lot of the attitude towards consumer applications with the iTunes App Store, and they anchored everybody to want to pay either $0 or 99 cents, and anything over 99 cents immediately became way too expensive, even though we are totally accustomed to going to Starbucks and buying a $4.50 latte that we consume immediately, whereas something that we buy in an app store, we consume potentially over a long period of time, but it's hard to, the value that is not communicated well, part of that problem, Apple has to own up to the, hey, we kind of ruined it for everybody. Or the first person who dropped their price to 99 cents screwed everybody else up, right? Whether it was Angry Birds, remember.
So I think in terms of the games, like, not the games like Angry Birds, you can pay for it or pay for more levels, but the games where you essentially come in, it's free, but you pay to speed up time, or you pay to like get different things. I think that's really smart. In more consumer tech, Runkeeper, which is a mobile fitness application for tracking like runs and other fitness activities. I think they do a really good job. There's not a specific value metric. It's basically premium features. But they've just done a really good job in like identifying, because it's not necessarily you absolutely need this, but you need to start looking at it on a consumer side of where that conversion is going to take, and then obviously like optimize for that activity, whatever it is, and they've done really, really well with that.
The other one people love to hate, and I think that is certainly broken and need to be fixed and could be driven a lot more profitable is so Comcast, right, is the obvious one, but when you force consumers to buy a package that they're only going to use a small percentage of, one, it creates a negative attitude towards the company, and then two, you figure out really quickly, hey, I'm not using this nearly as much as I am paying for it, I'm out of here. And we're seeing that with people moving to cut the cable and whatever it is that they're doing, because they don't want to spend $150 a month on.
There's a really dangerous flip side of this too with net neutrality. If you end up having to pay for certain areas of the internet, it's technically follows these tenets of value metric, but it's also like, there's a nickel and diming aspect to this. So that's something really to keep in mind on the B2B and B2C side, is like, you really need to make sure that when you're doing this, it doesn't feel like a nickel and dime situation. And those events, to speak to like a mixed panel or Kissmetrics, that could feel like that if they didn't have the throttle set up correctly. So whatever you're doing and whatever you're trying to throttle, I think it's really important to keep in mind. What we typically suggest is do just a statistical distribution of that metric across your customers or prospects or whoever you're trying to monetize, and then find the cutoff points. They're pretty obvious when you look at the data. And then we recommend pricing or putting that throttle at around 90 to 95% of that group to push them up essentially to that next plan. And if you combine this also with feature differentiation, it can actually create a really cool effect, because so we've worked with some CRM companies, and they won't include the project management features until you have 4 users. They know that you need pretty much 4 users to actually value those features, and then once you have those 4 users, it's all of a sudden it opens up this whole new like tranche of the product that really has a really good user experience as well. So that's another way to look at it when combining these two together. In terms of packaging, this is basically like, what are you selling to that persona? And this is how we start connecting, who's the most valuable, who's the least valuable. And along with that, we kind of alluded to this in the persona conversation, but your tiers should be segmented and discrete. So as I mentioned, when you're having these features differentiated, you need to make sure that there isn't a huge decision process between, well, I don't really know if I need that feature. I don't really know if I need 5 users. It should be really, really down to a science where okay, Startup Steve comes in at basic. I know when all of a sudden he becomes a marketing Mary, if he becomes a marketing Mary, he's gonna, or he or she is gonna jump up to plus, and so on and so forth. This is a really big point too, because a lot of companies, their product, that's why they're funded, that's why they're being successful. but you guys can build anything. You can build this feature, you can add these features, you can take these features away. And so it's really, really important to, not only know what you should build next from a prioritization standpoint, but know how you kind of take all of those features and split up the rate card or split up the pricing page or split up what you're doing to make sure that MRR is constantly going up as people upgrade or people use your applications more and more. And regardless of, even if you want to be, like the Wistia example that we used where everyone gets all of the features regardless of what plan they're on, it's still really important to know what type of emails or dunning that you need to do for that basic customer when they come in. If the basic customer comes in and they're only going to use these 3 features, you don't want to send them an email that has, hey, here's the enterprise features that you might be interested in when you have 100 people working for you or something like that. So Litmus, these are good guys up in Boston as well. They do email rendering testing. Basically, you're sending out email marketing. You want to make sure it looks good in every browser, every email client, et cetera, et cetera. I always rag, on Paul here because he doesn't have a scalable value metric. It's pure feature differentiation. But he knows that those basic folks, he knows their designers, he knows exactly what they want, and we'll get into how you can measure that. He knows exactly what their willingness to pay is, and this is an older pricing page, just keep in mind. He knows those plus customers, who they are. They're either small agencies or they're individuals who have a bigger marketing team, and he knows exactly that those premium customers are agencies. And he's kind of feature differentiated here along those lines, and there's some variable value metric with the monthly opens. But he knows that plus customer, if they have more than 500,000 monthly opens with email analytics, they really should be a premium customer anyways, to the point that I was talking about with kind of the CRM. So how to figure this out? So the big thing is ask people. It's not a huge secret, and that's why I said it's not difficult, it's just a process. But typically when we ask people, to rank features or to figure out what we want, we ask them questions like this. Please rank the following features on a scale of 1 to 7, 1 to 10. And normally what happens is, especially if you're talking to salespeople and trying to tell salespeople, everything is a 10. Everything is a 10, I want everything. It's really, really important to have it. And even if it's, 8s and 9s and things like that, you get results that look like this. And for me to tell you that feature 8 is less important than feature 1, we don't have the full scale and statistical significance here, but it would be really, really difficult because technically that's true, but also it's so close, it's probably within the variance. So the only thing that you need to switch up when you're talking to your customers is do something, it's called max diff. It's kind of a modified conjoint analysis if you guys have any statistical background. But it comes down to asking what's the most important feature and what's the least important feature. And I could share you some articles and resources that show you how to actually specifically do this. But when you do this along, and these different colors would represent different personas, when you do this along different types of customers, you start to figure out, like here, the second to the bottom feature, that really, really dark blue, they like that more than the lighter blue and kind of the mid-range blue there. Sorry, it'd be easier if I put names to these colors, but or made these colors a little bit different than blues and greens here. But the basic concept is figure out what are the 3 things that Startup Steve can't live without, what are the 3 things that Marketing Mary can't live without, and what are the 3 things that Enterprise Eddie along those different customer personas that you're talking about are targeting. And it's a huge thing for you guys, especially when you're figuring out your pricing, because you have those 15 features and you want to shake them up into these different tiers. And it's good to know like what Enterprise Eddie wants. Another way to think about this is, SaaS pricing pages. I think I have one. No, I don't here. SaaS pricing pages. There's very few variations from this. There are very few variations from a rate card even. You're gonna have a certain number of packages. Those packages are gonna include a certain number of features. There's gonna be some differentiation here. So if you're trying to get around building your pricing page, a nice little trick to do is figure out what is core to everyone. So what does everyone need to use to make the product function, and what are the additional features that maybe startup Steve is really interested in, especially if you have a free plan or trying to get someone who's smaller. And that's your leftmost plan, at least in this sense. What is everything in the kitchen sink? That's your rightmost plan. And then based off of this data, how many plans do you need in between? Maybe you only have one other feature that differentiates those two groups, and that's your middle plan. Maybe you have a couple of groups of features. So we work with BigCommerce, and they found that one level of customer really cared about marketing features, and then the next customer up in terms of willingness to pay, and we'll talk about that in a second, cared about the marketing features, but also cared about the operations features. And so that became those two plans where they had the basic, it was a more marketing focused one, and then a more operations focused and the marketing, and then Enterprise Eddie, who wants everything essentially.
So suppose you're starting from scratch on this kind of analysis.
Sure.
A couple just basic questions.
Yeah.
Who would you recommend?
Who do you talk to?
Yeah. Who do you survey?
Totally. So it's good to, one, hopefully you have something up to collect responses. So this doesn't have to be something where you're, it's a big, I'm collecting thousands of responses. You can do this. So we worked with HubSpot on their Signals application. It's the new thing that they came out with that's basically a clone of Yesware, if you've heard of it. Shows you when people open your emails, basically. And they had a group of salespeople, and they asked 12 people in their normal product conversations, basically, similar types of questions, and they plugged in the data. You start to see a trend. Now, if you want to, and this is to the point about, getting something out there and then iterating on it with pricing rather than just your product or your customer or your marketing. Some places that you can go, there are market panel research firms that you can go to. Forums are huge, especially if it's a type of consumer product. You can't necessarily control who's answering the question unless it's a very specific forum. But there's this product called Ask Your Target Market, where you can literally just go in, tell them who you want, set up the survey, and put your credit card in, and get, depending on who you're trying to go after, for $150 you can get 100 quality responses with answers to those questions. A lot of the folks I know that we've talked to, they have at least good lists or users or prospects that they can use. On the enterprise side, that's a more directionality thing, like we talked about when I was first answering the question, where, yeah, it's an enterprise deal. You might talk to a lot of prospects, but you're going to close 20 deals this year, and that's your year. So it's a little bit different. You have to be, a little more focused. But yeah, there's plenty of places to go to that you can find folks.
You can go to your customer base first, and we would sort of prioritize that over everything else. I don't know if that was clear.
Yeah, sorry. Talked around a little bit. But yeah, I think, and even if you have free customers, they're good to talk to. It's just the segmentation is key to find this kind of stuff out.
Great.
So each customer should have a point of entry and a place to grow. Kind of belabored that point. It's really important to look into because you want to make sure that they don't cap out. This is a problem a lot of feature differentiated customers see, where they come in at $49 a month and they never go up. Or for you guys, they come in at $30,000 a year and they might never go up because they don't have more competitors, they don't have more keywords they're interested in, things like that. You want to set this up whether you're a touchless SaaS business or you're high volume sales teams and things like that. And then finally, it's funny because this is the least amount of slides, but it's kind of the brunt of the topic is pricing. So this is, how much is your customer persona willing to pay for what you're selling? So what you've done here is you've kind of identified 5 to 10 potential customer personas, or you've been in the game long enough that you know who those customer personas are. You've gone through, you've figured out that packaging, and from that packaging information, you typically can build a couple of straw men, basically examples of packages that you could test. So let's say, from the packaging information, hey, there's these 4 plans that are coming out based on the feature differentiation that these folks have, and that's what you can start testing amongst these groups. Or if you're early enough, you can start testing in the wild when the stakes are lower. The big thing here, though, kind of talked about this already, but ask them. Like I said, there are ways to get a back door into pricing, but a lot of times it's easier just to go right to the customer. And if you ask them in the right manner, they're willing to be a lot more honest than you think. We've run, I think we've run actually 1 million surveys by this point, or surveyed 1 million people, and we've talked to plenty of customers. We've never had anyone freak out and say, "Why are you talking about pricing?" People have been concerned, but that actually works into your advantage because then they want to be involved in the conversation. You can talk to them about it. But it's really important just to go straight to the customer. So this is, just the pricing here. So once you have those straw men, there's 2 ways that you can do this really, really easily. One way is a little bit more sophisticated than the other, but the first one here that the picture is kind of depicting is something known as price laddering. And on the enterprise side, especially for you guys, this is something that you might be able to use really easily in your customer development, where essentially you just go to a customer, you describe what they're going to buy, or a prospect, and you describe what the package looks like, or the new package, or the add-on, or whatever package you're trying to test, and you set the benchmark. You say, would you pay $150 for this, just for the sake of argument? And if they say yes, then you ask them, would you pay $1,000 for this? And let's say they say no. So typically back in the 70s when this was developed, they would then go back to the same person and say, okay, would you pay $200 for this? But obviously the customer figures out what's going on and they start saying no right away, and then you can get artificially down. So what you then do is you have that range, and then you can go to the next prospect or the next customer, and for the most part, using those competitor information, those benchmarks, maybe in what range you are. But you go to the next customer then and you say, would you pay $200? Yes. Would you pay $900? No. And eventually, over the course of a number of customers, you'll figure out what's going on with your pricing. Another way to do this as well is, if you have a very formal proposal process, make sure that you've put into a spreadsheet what those packages look like and what those different modules of pricing look like, and then start testing them. And if you find, oh my God, they close way too quickly, then try to raise the prices on the next person. If it takes 6 months to close, then you have a problem and you need to lower the price maybe. Because it's all connected, you just want to make sure it's organized in a manner where you can quickly and easily, be nimble and iterate on that price. The other way, which is something that we advocate a little bit more for, is known as Van Westendorp analysis. And the basic premise of Van Westendorp analysis is you ask individual customers in ranges what their willingness to pay is. So there's 4 standard questions, and you can do this across those different packages that you came up with. But for Van Westendorp, you would say, at what point is this too expensive? You would never buy this. At what point is this getting expensive, but you'd still consider purchasing it? At what point is this a really good deal? You'd sign up right away. And sometimes, most importantly, is something that people don't think about. At what point is this too cheap that you question the quality of the product? If you came in and said, hey, I'm giving you this really super SEO dashboard and it has all these really good analytics, and you said, oh, it's $25 a month, I'd be like, well, clearly this business isn't going to be in business. I don't want to get involved in a deal with them, or they just aren't doing what they say they can do. And I'll send over information that basically has how you calculate this and how you can do this in Excel or wherever you're going. But even if you're not going to necessarily calculate this out and build these graphs, what you can do is you can start to get where those ranges are in a more directional manner as you're kind of iterating on those pricing that's out there.
So on this chart, I don't know if you're going to dig into this a little bit more, but I imagine one curve is when it's too expensive, and the other one's when it's too cheap. What's the significance of the intersection points?
If you can see my cursor, it looks like you can. Each of these corresponds to one of the questions. So let's say this is a group of 50 here answering it. This diamond, basically from this leftmost point, it's not the most perfect looking graph, from this leftmost point to this rightmost point, that's really your optimal price range. Your optimal price point, or the indifference price point, is really what we suggest, and that's this point right here. That's essentially the intersection of when it's getting when it's too expensive, and when it's getting expensive, and when it's a really, really good deal. And that's a really, really important point, mainly because it's the middle of the data. And if you guys aren't going to be, surveying 100 people or, doing a really extensive statistical study, you want to basically have the middlemost point of the data. The bottom graph here that's produced, this is essentially looking at the percent of sales lost versus the price point. And you'll notice because this wasn't, the variance here was a little higher, it's a pretty flat bottom here, and it's a pretty wide range from something like $35 to $55. We've seen much more acute or much wider ranges as well, and it's something to kind of look at and consider because they know they're around a $40 to $50 product by this data, but they also know, hey, there's some people who are willing to pay $60. Half the population, at least in this data, is willing to pay that. So it's something that opens up kind of a Pandora's box of conversations because, is this a persona that we want to specifically pursue? Let's do some back of the envelope calculations and figure out, well, if we can target this customer at a higher rate, our numbers will actually be better. And that's why the persona analysis is so deep. So you'll have, imagine 3 different graphs that look like this for, your entry-level customer, your mid-market customer, and your big customer. Where you can actually see, okay, we know that Startup Steve is willing to pay this, mid-market this, and you can even do this across those different packages that you had, opening up basically the data-driven way to build that pricing page. Does that make sense? It's a lot to take in terms of, it's pretty straightforward to understand, the methodologies. It's a lot to take in how they all connect to one another. And we have some good resources that we can share with you guys to talk about those connections. Basic premises though, who are your personas? What do they care about? What do they want in terms of packaging? And then how much are they willing to pay for those packages? Once you have all those puzzle pieces, flipped over, you can put them together and essentially build that pricing page. So just taking a look at HubSpot again here. So HubSpot, essentially what they figured out is they have 3 types of customers, like we kind of alluded to already. This basic customer, this professional customer, and then finally the enterprise customer. And this is all feature differentiated. So enterprise gets everything, basic has the core, and I think professional has, the addition of A/B testing and a couple of other things. And then they have the context like we talked about with that value metric. So they're not just pegging themselves at $600 per month. As that customer grows, they can justify charging them more. I think I have one more example here. Yeah, MailChimp, we talked about them a little bit. They've essentially figured out what their elasticity curve looks like at each of these points, which is a pretty big deal because of how many options they have. So you can go monthly, you can go high volume, you can do pay as you go. And they've been really, really successful at figuring out where those throttles are and how much the willingness to pay is. And a cool point here is notice that this is a $5 difference, this is a $15 difference, 20, 25, and it kind of scales up. And that's because they know that once they reach a certain point, the stakes become higher, they're making more money or nurturing more leads or more contacts. Therefore, we can align that a little bit more along where the value metric is. The basic point here, just utilize a data model and talk to your customers. You can do laddering with, especially on the enterprise side, it's a little easier. You can do Van Westendorp on the enterprise side, but you don't want to stop in the middle of a sales conversation and say, oh, how much is it? Well, let me ask you a few questions and then peg you on there. And that's the point, for you guys, it might be, hey, go back to your existing customer base before there's a renewal conversation and hey, we're doing a pricing study. What we found is a lot of folks are really excited to be involved in that value conversation. And the way you position it is, hey, it's a two-way street. We want to make sure we're providing you the value that we think you are, which is good. So the recap, very, very high level here, and this is just the same things that you already saw. All about the customer, figure out those customer personas, and quantify them. So there's a lot of stuff out there in the echo chamber about, let's get in a room and, give funny names to them and give them faces and talk to them about them. But you really have to quantify them. You really have to figure out what they want. And even in your database, you have to figure out, well, Startup Steve, we've identified these folks as the Startup Steves. what's the breakdown of their usage, or what's the breakdown of how many things or what's it that they use. Figure out what they want, make sure it's aligned along a value metric, make sure that they can grow. Sorry about that.
Oh, Citrix.
Oh, that was infinite there. And then make sure you use a data model to walk through where pricing is. I think that's about it. Oh, some resources for you guys. We'll send a couple of blog posts that'll be important. And we can talk about what I like to call the last 5% too. So there's a lot of pricing content that's out there about, you should end your prices in 9s or 5s, or, put your highest tier on the left instead of the right, and things like that. Those aren't, silver bullets either, but they are stuff that, we come across a lot, or discounting. But our blog is, we're all about inbound marketing, talked about HubSpot a lot. It's not the prettiest thing, but we publish a ton of content on it. It's kind of what we're known for in the quote unquote pricing or SaaS pricing world. Got a couple of good ebooks. One is kind of a more general pricing strategy ebook, and there's another ebook that we did a kind of a study and a survey of 300 pricing pages, just to get feel for what it looks like in terms of design, price points, and stuff like that. Doesn't help you guys as much, well, a little bit with what you're doing. Here's our emails, the Twitters as well. And yeah, so questions. I do have some of those fun facts that I can share for you guys. I know not everyone's like a pure SaaS company, so I don't want to necessarily share those unless you guys are really interested in them. But that was the top level. I've either overwhelmed you, or there's really specific questions. So, or either or. So I'd love to kind of open it up.
Let's start with the phone. Anyone on the phone have questions, or even if it's specific to your business? Because a lot of times, I think getting down in the details and seeing how other people think about things can be super helpful.
There's a lot of shared questions.
Yeah, exactly. Someone else
Yeah.
does. So, anyone on the phone have a question? I'll take that as a no. I'll ask one on behalf.
Hey, this is Bill Beckermarket. I actually had a question.
Hey, Bill.
Hey guys, thanks for doing this today, and also for coming into the office on such a bad weather day.
Yeah.
I had a question. So, and this is specific to my business, so I apologize to the other attendants on the call. Hopefully we'll get something out of it. We're in the process of testing, trying to shift our business from kind of a spot transactional business to something that people pay for on a monthly basis, people that do these transactions very regularly. And so it's kind of in addition to it being a business shift, it's also kind of a cultural shift for our clients, because they're not used to accepting the service under the auspices of paying for it monthly. They're used to it. When these things come up, we pay for them, and that's it. And I was curious to hear if you guys have had any experience working with other clients where they're going through, they're trying to transition their business and their pricing model to something that people pay for regularly as opposed to paying for on a spot basis.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So Litmus, I talked about them a little bit. They have a persona that's kind of downriver that they were serving in a very transactional manner. Now the context here is they've always had some form of monthly plan. But I think the biggest thing, and it's kind of, there's some soft advice and then some harder advice. The soft advice is just make sure that obviously that you're communicating what's going on. It's really hard from a pragmatic standpoint to make that type of a transition depending on the size of your customer base. From a hard data standpoint, I think you really got to test the pricing model out. So what is always good for you guys and convenient for you guys, going to a SaaS model monthly, obviously that really helps the numbers. But it might be something that user just doesn't want or isn't comfortable with. So there's a couple of ways that you can test that out, which is, even just asking, how much would you pay for this on a monthly basis, and what's your, likelihood to buy for something like this. Beyond that, I think if that's validated, I would do some testing where, you might grandfather folks who are currently paying transactionally, and I need to dig into the business a little bit more, but you might grandfather those folks for a little while, or new prospects would only go to, you know, the SaaS model or the monthly model. And then that's a good way to kind of test it in the wild and compare and contrast success rates and things like that. Is that helpful? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's kind of the short and skinny is there's really no substitute for just taking this problem directly. I won't call it a problem, but taking this transition directly to the customers and just saying, listen, this is what we're trying to do with our business. Here's why we think it makes sense for you. And then kind of going to that point in your slideshow where it's like, here's how we budgeted this out so that it, you know, you can look at it as, you know, here's what you're paying transactionally, here's what you'll be paying if you do it monthly. There's, you know, you should be indifferent, but are you indifferent?
Yeah.
And then kind of see where the conversation goes from there.
Bill, I think you want to make sure as much as you can that when you start to have that discussion, if you do, that you frame it around value for them, and you put yourself in their shoes as much as you can initially, so that if you think about the questions you want to ask them or the direction that you want to take them from a model perspective, your understanding of, hey, this is the value that I'm potentially going to get out of it, and you can communicate it to those folks on the phone or in person, or however you do these, you know, this kind of question and answer session. I think that's really important. I don't think we can reiterate that enough or talk about that enough. It's got to be about value for your customer, not necessarily about bottom line for you guys.
And I think doing kind of an impact analysis as well of, you know, once you figure out, you know, if and what that willingness to pay is for that monthly plan, to Peter's point, comparing and contrasting it to what they're already paying might be a really good idea in terms of, well, you know, you're already paying, you know, X per month for these transactions. I know, you know, the predictability of these transactions might not be perfect, but, you know, we're moving to this model, and I wouldn't, I was telling these guys before we got hopped on the call, like, don't make any pricing changes unless you're adding value in some form. The worst types of pricing changes are just, hey, we're doing this now, like, thanks. You know, even if you've gone through all the conversations that, you know, we just talked about, make sure that there's a product improvement, there's something that you can coincide, you know, launch aside it. And maybe those tiers, you know, are providing those new features. So it's like, well, you know, you might not be able to predict it, but you're getting all of these features. You're going to have people who are unhappy no matter what you do. So make sure to, you know, obviously prime your sales folks or your support folks, depending on, you know, your structure, for those conversations. And if the impact analysis is pretty equal, then most of the time you won't have as many of those hard conversations as you would want. Or you don't want any, but you get what I'm saying.
Gotcha. No, that sounds like really good. I guess if you kind of show up with just a conversation, your risk of freaking your customers out is pretty high. But when presenting it in the context of, you know, here's what you were doing before, here's what you're getting, here's what you'll get now, and here's the impetus for why we think it brings value to you guys. That should make it more of kind of a constructive conversation rather than we're changing our prices.
Totally. And a big thing to think about, like, for everyone is, you know, yeah, this is asking your customers, you're running surveys, you're doing all this. The point of doing all this legwork is to mitigate and hedge as much risk as possible, because you'll never know 100% until you put it out in the wild and can actually get those numbers out there. It's just, unfortunately, A/B testing pricing has a lot of problems to it. You know, early stage companies can do it and get away with it because they're early stage and the risk is less, but by doing a lot of this work and you know, asking your customers and getting this data, you can hedge a lot of it. So, you know, hey, there's going to be some edge cases where people are either really, really grossly affected, and you can handle those how your support typically does. But for the most part, net everything is in a better direction for the customer, for you as a business, and everything as a whole.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And one quick question I had. So VW now has just seemed like a linchpin to a lot of the ways to think about pricing. And, you know, we went through it sort of quickly, but for some folks who haven't seen this before, do you have a resource that walks through that process step by step?
Yeah, totally. We can do that. We also, you know, this is just because it was the question, you know, our software includes VW, so we have a really, you know, if you work with us, and we've modified it, so my background's in econometrics and data science, so that's kind of where I come from, but If one, if you need access to this or just want to see how it works or something like that, we have a really aggressive free trial because most of our companies that work with us in a service capacity. But for the folks on these calls, we can definitely give them an example and they can use it and see how it works.
And there's a general resource.
Yep.
It's sort of like a how-to manual.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the front end of the conversation.
Or we can walk people through. We're happy to. Somebody on the team, we can always walk through people.
Yeah, totally.
Get quote unquote demo or something like that.
Great.
Better to understand that way.
Any other questions from the phone? I think we have maybe a minute or two left here. Anything, even if it's specific to your challenges, feel free to ask. No? All right.
Cool.
Well, thanks very much, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you guys.
This was good.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everyone on the phone. We're going to wrap things up, but I think we'll send around the materials. We're going to send around the recording as well as some of the resources that we talked about. And these guys are more than willing to help out for a little bit, to spend a little time with you, to think through your specific situation if that's a conversation you want to have. So thanks again, Peter and Patrick.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.